And it's time for our first video post. Now previously we discussed our plans for building a scrolling shooter using the art assets originally created for the game Tyrion, and so generously licensed by David Cook. But before we start, we need to have Visual Studio 2010 and XNA version 4 installed. So if you don't have those, look in the show notes, get them downloaded and installed on your computer. Now our first task is to go ahead and create a game project, an XNA game project, to build into our scrolling shooter. And we do that by opening Visual Studio and either selecting New Project from the Start page or from the File menu. And we want to make sure that we have the XNA Game Studio 4.0 template list selected. And we're going to create just a Windows game, just a standard Windows game. And we'll go ahead and name this imaginatively Scrolling Shooter. And you may also want to put that in a particular location. I like to keep my files in the XNA directory of my user account. And when we click OK, XNA will go ahead and generate an entire framework for us to work from. So we get a couple files built in, the program and the game file, which we might want to rename. And apply that to all the elements using it. And we have actually two projects that are created. We have our game project, Scrolling Shooter, but we also have a content project, which is a special project we use for holding all the assets we want to use in our game. Assets are things like the textures, the images, the videos, the sounds, basically anything that's not program code that the game needs to be able to run. In our case, we're going to be using the remastered Tyrion graphics that David Cook made available on his website, Lost Garden, as a starting point for building all of the images we want to use in this game. Now these are sprite sheets, which are basically a collection of various elements that we want to use in our game. For efficiency's sake, we've actually compressed them into a single image, so we'll actually have multiple different items that will appear in our game world. Here we're just storing them all in a single file. And we want these to go into our content project, so I'm going to go ahead and create a folder to hold those, and I'm going to call this folder Sprite Sheets, just to keep ourselves organized. Now we can load existing assets from anywhere on our computer. In this case, we're going to go into our desktop and find that remastered Tyrion graphics folder that I just showed you. And we're going to actually go ahead and upload all of these sets of sprite sheets. The shapes we'll come back to and load up a little later for a different purpose. Now that's going to create files, links for each one of these PNG images, and when we compile, we're going to actually compile this content project, and these will actually be repackaged in a slightly different form. We'll explore that process in more detail later, but what you want to take away is that we're actually packaging these up and getting them ready to use within our game. Now before we get too deep into working on our project, we also want to initialize and set up a repository for storing the changes as we make them. A code repository is essential in any development process. It's something you should always be doing. And in this case, we're going to be using Git, which is one of my favorite repos. We're going to go ahead and go to the directory that we just created, Scrolling Shooter. And once here, we're going to initialize a Git repository. Now I prefer running from the command line. There are GUI tools available for Git, as there are for most source version control programs out there, but I've always found Git to be a pretty good one, and I've always enjoyed working from the command line. Now we're going to go ahead and add all the files with the command git add period, and this is going to replace all, or put all the files that we have created into the staging area of our Git repository. And we can see that with the Git status. We have a lot of new files which are ready to be pushed into, and you can see, we scroll through, we have a lot of files. And to actually commit those, we need to do a git commit, and we're going to commit everything, and then we're also going to supply a message describing this commitment. So this commit just contains our initial XNA project files and our sprite sheets. Now if we check our status, we can see that on our master branch there's nothing to commit. Our working directory is clean. So that gets us ready to go. Now we can embark upon the adventure of coding our game.